Hello, everyone. We're giving everyone a few moments to join from the waiting room, and then we'll begin the webinar shortly. Hi, everyone. This is Sabrina Paganoni. I think we can start this webinar. I see that people have joined from the waiting room. I'm here with Dr. Mary Cudkowicz and our patient navigation team, Kathleen Small and Alison Bullitt. And this is our weekly webinar, April 20th, 2023. And with that, I think we can move to the next slide. So just to give you a brief snapshot or where we are with the platform trial, as you know, we're using a common protocol and shared infrastructure to test multiple drugs that are in development for ALS. We have included 7 drugs so far, but we're working on including more as well. Right now we are following participants actively in regimen E, and we are enrolling new participants for regimen F, and we will be enrolling for a regimen G as well very soon. So we are now, again, accepting new participants for F and very soon for G. So we're very excited to have hundreds of spots nationwide for people with ALS who may be interested in participating. While we are testing multiple different drugs, the schema or sort of, overall plan is similar across different regimens, meaning that participants will be part of a placebo-controlled randomized period that lasts 24 weeks, which is about 6 months, and people are randomized or randomly assigned to active drug or placebo within the regimen in a 3-to-1 ratio. So we can do something that would not be possible in a standalone trial, which is to really reduce the number of people on placebo. Normally for most trials, it's a 50-50 split or 2-to-1 in terms of the ratio. For the platform trial, we're able to do a 3-to-1 ratio because we are actually using the same common infrastructure, which allows us to save resources across the board, including fewer participants on placebo. And after the end of the placebo-controlled period, this is followed by something that we used to call open label extension, which was sort of a kind of a follow-on or optional open label extension of the study. And now the new nomenclature that we're going to be using moving forward for regimens F and G is active treatment extension, meaning a continuation of the active treatment so that we can compare people who started early compared to people who started later. That's kind of the overview of the program. Next slide. So we have a large network of sites. Actually, we have over 70 sites across the US, and we're really trying to continue to increase and add sites as they are interested and patients ask for more sites. And then every time we launch a new regimen, we need to bring every site on board. So while we have a network of 70 sites that have participated in previous regimens, right now, as of today, we are enrolling for regimen F at 36 sites. Those are the ones that are listed here on the slide, and the QR code and the link will also bring you to the website where you can actually check the activation status of sites near you. And again, we are continuing to activate more sites. So the expectation is that we will soon have many more sites that are active for regimen F, and we're obviously already working on getting sites on board for G, so that we expect that basically by the summer, the majority of sites will be open for F and G. Again, it depends a little bit on sort of how long it takes for each site to get up and running with their training for that specific regimen. Next slide. So if you want to know the status of the site near you at any given time, you can always go on our website as indicated on the slide. And all sites are at least active at the minimum because they've been participating in previous regimens. So active, not recruiting as indicated on the slide, means that the site has not been activated for F yet, which is the regimen that's currently enrolling, although the vast majority of them are very much active in terms of working to kind of close out previous regimens or working on other aspects of the trial. The ones that are listed as recruiting, like NOVA in this case, on the slide means that they are actively recruiting new participants for F. Next slide. And so if you have questions about regimen F, we have a number of resources on our website. I really want to thank Catherine and Alison, who really have been working with other members of our team as well, to develop a number of resources that have been approved by our ethics committee for distribution. And so that means that you can view them on our website or print them out and share with family and friends. And those explain the basics of different aspects of the trial. So in terms of particularly relevant brochures, right now we have one on regimen F. And for regimen F, there is a big biomarker component, and we need to get spinal fluid to be able to analyze those biomarkers. And that's done by doing a lumbar puncture. That's why we have a dedicated lumbar puncture brochure, so that people who have questions about that particular procedure can find a lot of information on our website. Next slide. But as you know, we have also a lot of webinars. And so if you want to, obviously you can ask questions on this webinar. We're here every week, and you can type your questions in the Q&A box about any topics really. But in particular, if you have questions about regimen F, you can ask on these Thursday webinars, or you can watch the recordings of the previous webinars that have been recorded and posted on our website. They're available on our website, as you can see on the slide. The scientists who actually developed the drug that's been tested in F were able to present data on the drug and also answer questions from the community. That, again, everything was recorded and posted on our website. Next slide. As I said earlier, the regimen F in particular, but also the other regimens, have a very big biomarker component. For those of you who are new to ALS, biomarkers are markers that we can measure in either the blood or the spinal fluid, and they're teaching us a lot about ALS. And they're also particularly important as we develop new drugs, because they can do different things depending on the biomarker. For example, some biomarkers can tell us if the drug that participants in the trial are receiving is essentially biologically active. Some biomarkers can tell if the drug is doing the action that it's supposed to do. And so that's why it's very important that we collect these biomarkers from people that participate in trials. And in particular for F, again, these are spinal fluid biomarkers that are very important. And so we have this webinar by Dr. Maragakis that's coming up soon. If people have additional questions about lumbar puncture and the spinal fluid, please register for that webinar. He was also here, I should say. All our previous Thursday webinars are also recorded on our website. And Dr. Maragakis was here 1 week, and then we also had Dr. Rofstein and Dr. Berry come and talk about similar topics. So if you have any interest in biomarkers or spinal fluid, we have plenty of resources. Next slide. And I think that brings us to the last slide, which is also our favorite slide. We generally close these webinars with that slide, because we really want to remind everyone that we have this wonderful resource. Our patient navigation team, Catherine and Alison in particular, are always available to answer your questions by phone, email. We have a newsletter, and again, all the QR codes on these slides, which are these slides also you can download from our website. They can bring you up to to the registration for this webinar or other important resources. We often have guest speakers on our webinars, and we're very, very excited to have our own Judy Carey next week. She's a research access nurse at MGH, and really, in a way, that's kind of her role at MGH at our hospital is sort of similar to what Catherine and Alison do for the platform, which is really to serve as a navigator and help with research access for anyone who may be interested in research access at our site in particular. And then Catherine and Alison really brought this on a larger scale with access to the platform trial at all sites. And so with that, I'll stop here and start taking your questions. As always, we have great questions. And so for Dr. Cudkowicz, if you're part of regimen F and decide to not do the lumbar puncture, can you tell us more about how that would work?
Oh, yeah, and thank you for asking that question. The lumbar puncture, or the CSF biomarker, is really important for really all studies, but particularly for F, because it's going to help us figure out drug engagement, and if there are certain people who maybe respond better based on CSF biomarkers. So it is a required part of it. If someone comes in, let's say they do the first one and for some reason they can't do the second one, obviously people stay in the study, but we are hoping that everybody will do both of the lumbar punctures.
So there's a question about stem cell research, and there's the question particularly is about the STELSAM program at Cedars-Sinai. So someone is asking, is it different from Regimen F?
Yes, those two programs are very different. And we work very closely with Dr. Svensson at Cedars, and so we know his study. In that study, they're taking stem cells originally from the spinal cord of an embryo, and they're neuron-like cells, and they modify them to secrete a protein called GDNF, which is a growth protein. And they inject them near the motor neurons in the part of the brain up here, the frontal cortex, to see if they can help the upper motor neurons, the ones up there, survive longer. It's a phase 1 trial, meaning that it's the first time they're injecting those cells up in the brain area, and they're really looking at safety, tolerability, as well as clinical effects. It's a small study, and the mechanisms are really about trying to support your existing motor neurons. The Regimen F mechanism is more targeted around what's going on in the motor neurons. So we know that there's something called integrated stress response, where the motor neurons are under the stress, the TDP-43 protein is aggregating and causing downstream problems, and the calico drug, or the Regimen F drug, blocks that stress response and helps clear that TDP-43. So really different mechanisms, also different phase of development. The Regimen F has already finished the phase 1 study, and this is really phase 2-3 testing for longer term safety and efficacy.
So there's a question about the name of the doctor at Cedars-Sinai. Could you repeat that?
So the scientist whose work this is based on is Dr. Clive, C-L-I-V-E, Svensson, S-V-E-N-S-E-N. We can put that in the chat. Very nice man.
Yeah. So there's a question about lumbar punctures, a couple of questions. The first one is, will participants do lumbar punctures in Regimen in Regimen G, in addition to Regimen F? Or is that different?
Yeah, we are asking people in Regimen G to also do lumbar punctures. I do think it's really important in ALS and other neurological illnesses that the biology is really happening in the brain, in the spinal cord, and we're more likely to see really good biomarkers in the spinal fluid. There's some recent papers that just came out actually that show something called a biomarker in the CSF of what we call cryptic exons. That is, I think, really, really an important advance. And we're going to be looking at those in this study too, to see if the drug lowers that biomarker. Any field that discovers a biomarker that responds to treatment sees the therapy development accelerate 100-fold, because it means you can screen drugs in shorter time. We think 6 months is shorter. Trials used to be a year or 18 months, so 6 months is good, but we would love to get it down to 3 months or shorter if it was you could rapidly screen drugs based on these biomarkers, so you're bringing the best ones forward. Yeah.
So there's a question about whether there will be lumbar punctures in the active treatment extension and whether they're optional.
In the active treatment part, they're optional. Again, they're important, but they're optional. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Let me get more questions. Do you have results from Regimen D, as in David?
Yes. So we have shared in a press release, as well as a public webinar, and with the participants of Regimen D, those results. So in Regimen D, we saw in the entire population in the study, we saw positive effects on measures of speech measured by this home digital app that were statistically significant and clinically relevant. We also saw in a subgroup of participants, so not everybody, but in the group of participants who were progressing faster in the illness, we saw a statistically significant and clinically large effect on ALSFRS this functional range scale, as well as this biomarker neurofilament. We saw about 40% lowering of neurofilament. Now, when we looked at the entire group, we did not see that. So there's really a design thing here where in a 6-month study, it's sometimes easier to see a clinical effect if in the people who have a naturally faster course, a bit like what happened with the Amylyx drug as well as the Darivone drug. So we are working with Prolentia on designing a phase 3 trial. So basically, what we learned from this trial was really informative for the hopefully the last trial of Prolentia, phase 3 trial.
Great. When do we expect the results from regimen E trials?
So we expect the results for regimen E in the fall of 2023. So the last person in the double-blind period, what we call the randomized control trial, should finish that part of the study in August. And then it takes a little bit of time to get all the last data into the database, cleaned, monitored, make sure that it's ready for analysis, and then it goes to the statisticians. So we're hoping, we're trying to do as much as that beforehand, so it's as short a time as possible from that last person's visit in August.
Yeah. So can you tell us more about the active treatment extension? So a question was asked, is the active treatment extension guaranteed for regimens F and G, or can it be stopped once started?
Yeah, I'm glad someone asked that. So for regimen F and G, it is guaranteed. And so it's part of the protocol. It's part of the contract. The two companies are large companies with enough resources to cover both the randomized part and the open label and the active treatment extension. The only reason it would be stopped is if there was a safety reason for that, or if one of the interim analyses that we do showed futility and there was no point to continue it. But there's no financial risk on this one. And again, we're very sorry that that happened with regimen E, but it will not happen with F or G.
Right. So for those people who were in regimen E and that the open label extension, can you tell us more about how to access trials or what other options they have?
Yeah, we are working really hard with several organizations, including the NIH and the sites, to really try to make as many options as possible for people who were in the open label extension for regimen E. So if somebody was in regimen E open label extension and they're not eligible for other trials, there is the NIH funded CELOS EAP, and Dr. Paganoni is leading that, and there will be 20 to 25 sites in the US doing that. Many of the sites there have said that they would take participants from regimen E OLE, even if they weren't a patient at their site, and they'll do everything they can to help. So that's one option. If someone was in regimen E OLE and they're still eligible for trials, then they would just wash out of the regimen E drug, the Trelos, for 30 days, and they could re-enroll either in the platform trial or in other trials. And we know several people are doing that already. We are discussing with the NIH about expanding the expanded access program. So if putting in a supplement request to have more spots so that we can continue to offer that to people who weren't in the regimen E HEALEY platform trial, as well as those that were in it and completed the randomized controlled trial part of it.
Yeah, so we have a number of questions about regimen F, which is enrolling now. I'm glad to see that there's interest. So I'll start rapid fire different questions. So for regimen F, there's a number of questions again. One question is, somebody is writing that this person is from Kansas. And so should they come to Boston for this study, or how many times, would they have to travel to Boston? But I would say we also have sites in Kansas. So
yeah, we have a really good site in Kansas, and we can try to find out.
Yeah,
Catherine Small maybe could get back to you if you can connect here about when that site will be open. You could absolutely come to Boston, and if you did, there would be probably 3 visits up front, and then every 8 weeks. So it would definitely be better to do in Kansas, and hopefully that site will be open soon.
Yeah, so there's a question about the previous phase 1 study, or the still ongoing, that Calico is doing for the same drug. Do we have results from the phase 1 study?
No, we don't have results yet. So that study was initially a 4-week blinded study at 3 different doses versus placebo, and then an open label extension that's ongoing. They have not completed analyses of all of those results, and I don't have a timeline. We can ask Calico for that, but hopefully they're not that far away from having those results to share.
Great. You said that regimen F is a phase 2/phase 3 study. Is regimen G the same?
Yes, the platform trial was designed as a phase 2/3. And so what that means is we're looking at efficacy, we're looking at safety, and that if a drug is positive, that it could be considered by the FDA as one of what's typically required 2 studies for a drug registration for approval. And we designed it that way on purpose so that it could be rigorous and help get the approval, which is the goal. You know, we want as many drugs as possible working and approved, and so people have access to them.
There's a question about, again, this transition from phase 1 to phase 2/3. So the question is, how can Calico do a phase 2/3 study if they haven't completed the phase 1 study yet?
So in the phase 1 study, you're looking at a couple of things. You're looking at safety, dosing, and then longer term safety. So they obviously have results along the way on the safety and the dosing so that they could pick the dose. But they don't have yet any results of kind of how the long-term safety and long-term efficacy.
Yeah, and I see somebody asked Catherine to connect. So please email Catherine at the email that they sent so that you can connect about cancers and other studies. So question about screening and prohibited medications. So for F or for other regimens, high dose B12 injections are not allowed. So can you share sort of the dose per week that's acceptable?
Yeah, we have a design committee that meets regularly, and for B12, the decision was anything less than 25 milligrams a week would be okay in the study. What we really hope, and I don't know the plans, but we really hope that Eisai, the drug company that makes methylcobalamin, will file for approval in the U.S. Based on the 2 studies they've done. And if that happened, they got approved and was on the market, then for all trials, that just like Relyvrio, Radicava, and Riluzole, that would be okay. But I don't know if they're planning to do that or where that lands. I'd like to know.
Yeah. So actually, on approval, there's a question about if you could provide any updates on tofersen and Neuron, sort of FDA updates.
Well, for tofersen, there was an advisory committee. This is a gene therapy for SOD1 ALS that voted highly in favor for the question around accelerated approval, and that means approval based on the changes in the biomarker neurofilament. The AdCom did not vote in favor of full approval. It was, I think, 3 to 6 or 3 to 5. The FDA is required by law to make their final decision on both those questions by April 25th, which is just 5 days from now. So we're all waiting, and hopefully, I'm hoping for full approval, but we'll take accelerated. But we just want to be able to give access to our patients with SOD1 ALS. There is an ongoing EAP for people who have SOD1 ALS, so people should be able to access that now while we're all waiting for the FDA decision. I didn't have an update from Neuron. We'll have to ask Brainstorm. They I think there was a press release that they would be granted an AdCom by the FDA, an advisory committee meeting. But as far as I know, there's no date has been set yet.
Yeah. Going back to regimen F, so in our webinar, we shared that there's going to be different dosages tested. When people go to the active treatment extension, how does that work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So people who are on the higher dose would stay on the higher dose. People who are on the middle dose would stay on the middle dose. People who, I believe, and Sabrina, you have to correct me, I believe the people who were initially in the placebo arm of the double blind period will go into that middle dose.
Yeah, exactly. So I see a question about whether we could share the recent biomarker papers on cryptic exons here or on the newsletter. I think we have the link to the New England Journal of Medicine. I think it's available open access. I don't know if you have it available. If not, I can pull it up.
Yeah, we can definitely share those. They're, I think, both on bioRxiv. They could also be in other journals, but they're on bioRxiv.
Oh, yes, right.
Yes. If we don't get to that in 4 minutes, we can put them on our website and then put them up next week.
Yeah, we're good at multitasking, but this is hard to really do it on the spot.
They're open access though, so people can read them. Yeah, very exciting.
There's a great question, or a general question. Is there a universal biomarker across ALS or a mix of biomarkers used? And any word in terms of challenges in finding new biomarkers?
Yeah. We don't have yet a universal one, and I do think it might end up being a combination of biomarkers. I think that the challenge has been not just in ALS, but in all brain disorders of just how hard it is to develop these. But there's huge momentum in ALS now with a lot of biofluid repositories. Many people have donated their spinal fluid and their blood, and those. And a lot of people studying them, so that every trial now is including these fluid collections so that we can develop these biomarkers. And I hope there'll be some real serious federal funding for that.
A specific question about the dose of B12. So you mentioned that somebody needs to be, if somebody is entering the trial and they want to receive intramuscular B12, they need to stay at the dose that's below 25 milligrams per week, so essentially 24 or less. Yes. Why was that chosen? Is that considered subtherapeutic?
I think we don't know what the therapeutic dose is. So there were 2 trials that were done in Japan at 50 milligrams twice a week. So this is the challenge in trials, is that if there's something that's considered experimental and some people are taking, some people are not taking it, it can make it impossible to tell if the new drug works or not. So that's the reason for that. But once something's on the market, like the Relyvrio, then at the very beginning of the study, if we actually balance the groups by Relyvrio use so that it gets out of the equation. And then we're really comparing the new drug versus not taking the new drug. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to tell if the drug works.
So I think we took all the live questions and a couple of the ones that were sent in advance. So, Dr. Cudkowicz, any additional comments?
I just want to thank everybody for coming here and thanking people for being part of this study. And in other trials, this is how we're going to find treatments and find them faster. We're really excited about finishing E and starting F and starting G soon, and we're very happy to share. We're also in discussions with company H, so hopefully we'll be able to share that soon as well.
Great. And last minute question that just came in, any updates on the idea of platform trial conferences across other neurodegenerative areas?
Oh yeah, there are a few already being planned. I mean, this is a very new in neurology, but it's taking off. So there's a conference being planned next fall to talk about platform trials, including many different groups across different diseases. And next week, actually, Dr. Paganoni has a big talk at the Academy of Neurology meeting, a platform level talk to 10,000 neurologists or so about this platform trial. And they picked that because it's so important now in neurology in general, as there's more and more insights into what causes brain disease and more treatments. So that we're going to see some conferences from the Academy of Neurology as well. And the Healey Center itself is having a smaller conference in May, where we want to take a deep dive in the lessons learned from the first 4 drugs. Do we want to make any modifications going forward? And we're also bringing to that meeting, experts from other platform trials and other diseases.
There's a question about the conference in the fall that you mentioned about platform trials. Did you say the name by any chance, or can you?
I don't know. I'm not organizing it. Some of the statisticians are organizing it, but I can get the name. I just heard about it yesterday, so it's hot off the press.
Yeah, so we can look into that and also search for the exact link for the 2 papers. And next week we can definitely share it with you, and also Kathleen will have them by then if people want to reach out. That's great. Okay, thank you so much. I think we took all the questions today, and we'll definitely be back next week.
Thanks. Thank you for joining.